Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you're having an amazing day and thanks so much for joining me for another art video. Today, I'm going to be sharing the first class that I created for a mini course that I shared some time ago over at my website that is meant for the total beginner just getting started with drawing and sketching. This first class is all about basic drawing supplies, what you need, what you don't need as a beginner just getting started, and I also explain all about different drawing pencil grades, when they can come in handy throughout the drawing or the sketching process. And I also get into how to hold a pencil effectively for drawing and different basic drawing pencil grips that you should start exploring as a beginner. If you'd like to check out the entire course for free, make sure to check out the link that I'm going to be leaving down below in the description box. Simply opt in and you're going to get access to the entire course and the next 2 classes that have downloadable resources and actual sketching exercises, which are going to help you start forming a solid foundation to jump off from. All right, so with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into class number 1. I 100% believe that drawing is the basis for all kinds of art, and that developing great drawing skills is not only going to make it a lot easier for you to create original artwork from scratch, but it's also going to be much easier for you to move on to painting if you so wish to. You should also know that I really believe in drawing and sketching freehand as much as possible, as opposed to tracing or using grids. This is not to say that those methods are incorrect or wrong or anything of the sort. There is definitely a time and a place in which both beginners as well as more advanced artists can benefit from tracing and using grids. However, what I have seen both in my artistic journey as well as in many of my students' journeys is that doing freehand sketching and drawing as much as possible and as soon as possible is going to help you make much faster progress in your drawing. I personally consider myself more of a painter than a drawer. However, I really believe in maintaining a sketching and sketchbook habit throughout my artistic journey. It's a great way to continue developing my observational skills, my hand-eye coordination, and for most of us who lead very busy lives and sometimes find it difficult to take out our paint, drawing and sketching really provides a practical way to continue developing our artistic skills because we don't really need very many supplies at all. There is barely any mess or cleanup involved in drawing or sketching, and working on even smaller, quicker sketches or studies several times a week can do tons for artistic improvement. Time and time again, I see beginners just getting started with drawing, being super excited and wanting to jump straight into things like shading and very complex subjects such as portraits or animals. But the fact of the matter is that if you really want to get great at freehand drawing or sketching, you first have to develop a great hand-eye coordination, great observational skills, and you have to get really good at creating an effective preliminary pencil sketch before moving on to things like details and shading. And what I mean when I say an effective preliminary pencil sketch is that your initial outline sketch that you create has to show effective proportion, perspective, and location of individual elements within your drawing area before moving on to smaller details and shading. And this is especially the case if you want to get great at achieving high levels of realism. Just please, please, please understand that shading and texture is like the icing on the cake. If proportion and perspective are not correct in your base preliminary drawing, and you're still not at a point at which you're able to grasp that that subject that you have in front of you is a three-dimensional form with a variety of planes that can be seen from many different angles and perspectives, you can spend hours upon hours working on beautiful shading, and you can even be amazing at shading techniques. But your drawing is going to look off at the end because that base that is holding your drawing together looks wrong. We're going to get started with talking about basic drawing supplies, what supplies you should have and don't really have to spend money on as a beginner just getting started, as well as different ways that you can hold a pencil for drawing or sketching. Firstly, let's go ahead and get started with talking about drawing pencils. These pencils that you're watching me organize on my table right here are very basic graphite drawing pencils. Some of them are blue and some of them are turquoise because they are just different brands, but they are all basic drawing pencils. Drawing pencils like these have a core that is made up of graphite and clay and binders. You may or may not have noticed by now that in many drawing tutorials or classes that the artist has more than one pencil on hand and completes the piece using various pencils. These pencils might look the same at plain sight, but these are different pencil grades that the artist is using. And what this means is that even though these pencils look the same, their cores are made up of different ratios of clay and graphite and polymers. And the feel of the pencil throughout the drawing process, as well as the darkness of the marks it's able to produce, is entirely dependent on this blend and this ratio of clay and graphite and polymers. The higher the amount of graphite within the core of the pencil or within this ratio, the darker and softer its marks will be. And the more clay there is and less graphite there is within this ratio, the lighter the pencil marks will appear and the harder the pencil graphite will be. Drawing pencil manufacturers provide artists with a very wide range of different pencil grades to suit our needs and styles. And in order to make different pencil grades distinguishable, they mark them with these codes, which you have probably seen before, which are usually made up of one letter, two letters, or a number followed by a letter. And by learning what these codes mean, we're more easily able to reach for the pencils that we actually need for the task on hand. And not to mention, we know exactly what pencils to go for when we're at an art supply store, which greatly reduces the risks of spending our hard-earned cash on unnecessary supplies. Alright, so in terms of pencil grades, you're going to be able to find a wide range of B pencils, a wide range of H pencils, and you're also going to be able to find the HB, which in my little diagram that I created right there, you can see that the HB falls right smack in the middle of the B and the H. The B stands for bold, and B pencils have more graphite in their cores, which create bolder, darker, and smudgier lines. The greater the number in front of the B, the softer the pencil will be. On the other side of the spectrum, we have the H pencils, and H stands for hard. H-grade pencils have a core that has more clay and less graphite in them. They produce marks or lines that are lighter, finer, and less smudgy or more clean. And the greater the number in front of the H, the harder the pencil is. So right here, I am actually testing out an HB pencil. I'm also going to be testing out a 4B and a 4H. As I am doing these tests, I am exerting the same amount of pressure on my paper, which isn't very hard at all, and I'm holding my pencils in a very similar way. You're going to be able to tell the difference right away in terms of the mark's darkness, and I'm also going to be doing a smudge test so that you're able to tell how much more easily I'm able to smudge the 4B pencil versus the HB and the 4H. An important note I want to make here before we move forward has to do with the amount of pressure that we exert on our paper as we move forward in the drawing process. When we're drawing, it's very, very important that we don't damage our paper. When we're creating our preliminary outline sketch, for example, we want to make sure that we're drawing very lightly so that we're able to erase mistakes and refine as we go. And once we're done with that preliminary outline sketch, we want to move forward in layers and with lots of patience. And if we do use burnishing techniques, which basically means we're pressing down hard on our paper with our pencil tip, this would take place along the final stages of the drawing process. And the reason why I'm saying this right now is because as a beginner just getting started, you might ask yourself, well, I have one pencil and by pressing down harder, I can make those marks appear darker. And while this is true, having at least a few different pencil grades ranging from harder to softer is going to allow you to lay down more graphite and make darker, bolder values whenever needed without even having to press down on your paper at all. So having said that, you can probably already start getting an idea of how harder and softer pencil grades could come in handy at different points of the drawing process. As I mentioned before, your preliminary pencil sketch has to be spot on in terms of proportions and locations of the different elements before moving on to further detail or shading. And because I am doing my sketching or my drawing completely freehand, meaning I am not tracing or using grids, I need to be able to easily correct mistakes. Not to mention, if I am looking to develop higher levels of realism, I really want to make sure that my outline sketch that I create prior to starting with the shading and the texture completely disappears by the time that I am midway through my drawing process, because in realism, there are no outlines. And because of these reasons and more, it's very, very useful to start your drawing with a harder pencil grade or maybe an HB. Anything softer than that, and you could risk making your marks too dark right off the bat, or laying down way too much graphite on your paper way too soon, creating a mess since the beginning of your drawing process. All this said, you definitely don't need to have a large amount of different pencil grades when you're just getting started on your drawing journey or even later on. So I would never recommend you buying those huge sets with all of the different pencil grades in the world, because you're gonna end up not using like half of those. I would recommend buying an H grade pencil, something like a 2H or a 4H, buying one HB pencil, something that is completely balanced right in the middle, and buying a couple of B pencil grades, something like a 2B and a 4B, or a 4B and a 6B. Having these softer pencil grades is going to help, especially once you get into more realistic drawing and start getting into the development of different values. In my personal case, I have been drawing for quite a long time now, and I have discovered that I can complete a drawing using 3 or 4 different pencils. I usually get my drawing started with an HB pencil, because I'm not a huge fan of harder pencil grades. And then as I move on developing my different values in layers, I move on to a 2B, then a 4B, and something like a 6B or an 8B to develop my darkest values. As you move forward in your drawing journey, you're gonna discover along the way what techniques and style you personally like best, and you're gonna be able to know exactly which pencils to reach out for during your particular drawing process. Okay, everyone, let's move on to drawing paper. In my case, I remember starting with drawing on regular printing paper, and this is perfectly fine. If that's what you have on hand, go ahead and use that. However, once you move forward in your drawing journey, you're probably going to start getting frustrated because that paper gets very easily crumpled and damaged, and it just doesn't hold that much graphite very well. So once you start developing higher levels of realism and want to start working in layers, you're probably going to start getting frustrated because that paper is just not made to do that. So once you're ready to start investing in a better substrate for your drawing, there are a few different things that you can choose to go for. Lots of artists who like to draw go for bristle board, which can be found in single large sheets or pads with many sheets in them. You can also go for pads of sketching or drawing paper, like this one by Strathmore that I use quite a bit. Or you could also get a regular sketchbook. There are so many different types of sketchbooks that you can buy in all different types of formats. And in fact, I would highly, highly recommend you get some sort of sketchbook, even if it's an affordable one, because a sketchbook is gonna really entice you to continue drawing and keep a sketching habit. It's so rewarding to see how your sketchbook starts filling up with your work. And it's so helpful that you have all of your work together in one same place, and you're able to chronologically see your progress over the years. Right here, I wanted to point out in video so that you're able to see how the whiteness and the color of the pages of one of my sketchbooks compares to the whiteness of the pages of another sketchbook. Some artists enjoy pure bright white, while other artists enjoy off-white or even tan paper for their drawing. When it comes to different drawing substrates or papers, I would just highly recommend starting to acknowledge and compare mainly 3 different characteristics of different papers that you're able to find. Start comparing them in terms of their weight or their thickness. Start comparing them in terms of their tooth or their texture. and start comparing them in terms of their color. You're going to be able to find so many different types and degrees of all of these three things in the drawing paper you come across. And in my opinion, when you're just getting started, the best thing that you can do is actually touch the paper with your hands and see what feels right to you. When it comes to choosing a paper for drawing or sketching, usually you want something more on the smoother side. This is once again my Strathmore drawing pad, and you can see how the texture in this drawing pad compares to a piece of scrap watercolor paper, which has a lot more texture to it. It depends on your personal drawing style and the level of realism you're trying to achieve, but for the most part, you want drawing paper that is more on the smoother side, because the smoother the paper, more easily you're going to be able to glide along it and lay down and deposit that graphite, and later on create very smooth blending. When it comes to your paper's weight or thickness, I would highly recommend something that's along the 70 to 100 pound thickness, so that you can feel free to erase as much as you need to and not be afraid of damaging or making holes in your paper. And finally, when it comes to the color of your paper, this is going to be entirely up to you and your tastes. I would recommend giving thought to the drawing supplies that you're going to be using on that paper, whether you're only going to be using graphite pencils, whether you're thinking of using that sketchbook or that drawing pad for ink drawing, or whether you're also going to be bringing in color, like colored pencils or such. Think of how those marks and those colors created by those drawing tools are going to look in combination with that color of that substrate. Think perhaps of the style or the level of contrast that you want your marks to have. All right, you guys, so moving on to the other drawing supplies that you should know about, let's get started with erasers. I really like these very basic, very accessible Pelikan PVC-free graphite erasers. I love them because they are very soft and they never damage my paper. You can get whichever kind of regular eraser you'd like, but I would highly recommend you make sure that it's not a very hard and tough eraser that is going to damage your paper. I always make sure that I stay away from those very hard plasticky erasers. This second eraser that you're watching me play with right now is called a kneaded eraser. It looks like a little ball of Play-Doh or something along those lines, and it's very handy because you can manipulate it and make it into different shapes to go into your drawing into little areas and pick up excess graphite. You can even use the kneaded eraser to create different effects, but what I have found is that the kneaded eraser doesn't really clean up that little section of paper entirely. And if you really want to clean up a certain area or pull up hard highlights, it's very difficult to do with a kneaded eraser. And this is where the Mono Zero eraser comes in. I bought it through Amazon almost a couple of years ago, and since I discovered this one, I barely use my kneaded eraser anymore. It allows you to correct mistakes in little areas that a regular eraser would not be able to go into, and pull up highlights in realistic drawings to really make your artwork pop. You can see how the tip is retractable, it's round and very small in diameter, and you can also buy replacements for it via Amazon. I believe you can also find Mono Zero erasers that have a tiny rectangular tip or a rectangular shape instead of a circle. I absolutely love this item, and the link to this particular product is going to be left down below for you in the supply list for this class. This said, this item is not necessary for you to have when you're just getting started with drawing. The last two tools that I want to mention here are the sharpener and the blending stump. In terms of my sharpener, I don't do anything fancy at all. I just like making sure that I have a good quality metallic sharpener with me so that I don't risk sharpening off unnecessary amounts of graphite from my pencil or damaging it in any way. Blending stumps are very useful when you are creating realistic drawings, as they help you smooth out your graphite on your drawing paper, get rid of pencil marks, and create smooth and seamless transitions between your different values. All they are is basically rolled up paper, and something you have to be careful of is that once you start using them, their tips become saturated with graphite. They become so saturated with graphite that you can actually draw with them. So during your drawing process, you have to be careful that you don't start depositing graphite in an area that you weren't intending to. All this said, if you aren't really intending to do any realistic shading in your drawing yet, or you prefer to develop different values via alternative shading techniques like hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, contour lines, etc., you don't really need a blending stump. The last item that I'd like to introduce here is tracing paper. But we're not using tracing paper to trace our drawing or a picture or whatever, but to protect our drawing as we're going through the drawing process. You see, as we start laying down more and more graphite on our paper, things can become pretty messy because we are obviously moving our hand around our paper, collecting graphite on the bottom of our palm, and smudging it around. And so placing a piece of tracing paper under our hand can really help us keep things a little bit cleaner. You do want to make sure that you buy tracing paper that is on the lighter side so that you can actually see through it, because one of the benefits of using tracing paper for this is that you're able to not lose your place. Once again, a link to the tracing paper that I like using will be left down below for you in the supply list for this class. Alright, you guys, so the final section of this class is going to be all about how to hold your pencil for drawing and sketching. When we're young, we are taught to hold a pen or a pencil for writing purposes. And so when most of us get started with drawing, we try to hold our pencils in a very tight, controlled way. It's pretty difficult to break away from that, and it's expected that when you first hold your pencil in these new ways that I'm going to be talking about today, it can be pretty uncomfortable and difficult to get used to. This happens to all of us, don't worry, it's just a matter of keeping on with your practice. But two basic points here that I want you to keep in mind is that you have to start getting used to moving your entire arm when you're drawing, as opposed to only using your wrist the way you do when you write. And another thing here is that we're not going for perfection when we're sketching. We are starting something that is meant to be refined as we move on in the drawing process. So remember that you have to draw lightly when you're just getting started so that you're able to easily correct mistakes and erase any lines or shapes that you laid down to help you. It's not like when we're writing and we're expected to create a very clean and sharp looking letter, word, or sentence right off the bat. Drawing and writing are two very different things, and just because we're using a very similar tool for drawing and writing, we have to make sure that we're making that mental switch before starting each task. Alright, you guys, so I'm going to very briefly describe 5 different ways to hold your pencil for drawing. This particular pencil grip that you're watching me use right now is called the basic tripod grip, and this is the way that we're used to holding our pencil or pen when we are writing. It's very useful for moments in the drawing process in which we are looking for greater control or want to add in smaller details in little areas. When most of us get started with drawing, we're probably using this pencil grip the most. The next pencil grip is called the extended tripod grip. This is a modified version of the previous grip in which we are basically sliding our hand upwards and holding the pencil from much higher up along its body. You can see right there how I am holding my pencil somewhere along midway through the length of its body. Moving on to the overhand pencil grip. As you can see, I have rotated my hand to the point that my hand is now over it, and I am using my index finger to gently exert pressure on my drawing paper. Moving on to the tip-heavy overhand grip, and this is basically the same thing, but what I am doing is I am sliding down my hand a little bit closer to the tip of the pencil to the point that the tip of my index finger, as you can see, is very, very close to the tip of the pencil. And what this allows us to do is to have a little bit more control, and we're very easily able to create very dark lines or marks by pressing down a little bit harder with our index finger. I really enjoy using both of these overhand grips when I have to fill a large area of paper with graphite, as they make it really easy to go over your paper with the side of the tip of your pencil as opposed to only the very pointy end, allowing you to deposit more graphite and cover up larger areas a lot faster. And finally, we have the underhand pencil grip, which is basically as if you're holding the pencil in the regular tripod grip, but you rotate your hand outwards so that the majority of your hand is now under your pencil and your thumb is on top. So right about here, you're gonna start noticing that I start sliding back into the regular and extended tripod grips. And the reason why this is because I rarely use the underhand grip at all. It doesn't come very naturally to me. Which leads me to a very important point. You need to practice and discover which pencil grips come most naturally to you and which lead to the effects that you are personally going for. It's not like you have to use one specific pencil grip for the beginning and one specific pencil grip for this and one specific pencil grip for that. No, no, no. You have to discover which come more naturally to you and which go hand in hand with the techniques that you like using. It's good to know the different things that these techniques easily allow because we can use these as tools, but there is no right or wrong here. And there are even more pencil grips than the ones that I just explained, but these are a great point to jump off from and an awesome place to start practicing. All right, guys, so with that, our first class for this drawing mini course is coming to an end. And the homework exercises that I would love, love, love for you guys to try is A, start exploring different pencil grades, and B, start practicing different pencil grips and what it's like to start moving your entire arm versus only your wrist. You can explore and practice these things by doing warm-up or drill exercises such as the ones that you're watching me do on video. Start practicing different kinds of lines, different kinds of shapes, and you can feel free to fill some of these shapes up with graphite and try going over it with the tip of your finger to analyze how smudgy the graphite is. I do this kind of exercise all the time before starting with one of my classes or starting a new drawing after I haven't drawn in a while. They really help me warm up, get loose, and get in the flow for drawing. All right, you guys, that is going to do it for today's video. I really, really hope that you enjoyed it and that you found it helpful. And if you did, pretty please make sure to give this video a thumbs up because it really helps support the work that I am doing here on YouTube and helps others get to know about my channel. Thank you so much for watching today. Don't forget to subscribe and click on that little bell so that you can be notified of when I share my new videos, which happens every single week. Have a beautiful rest of the day and see you soon. Bye, guys.